Good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming this afternoon to celebrate and attending this afternoon even to mark the International Women's Day. International Women's Day is a global day celebrating the socio-economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call of action for accelerating women's equality. The theme for this year's Women's International Day is Embrace Equity. Equity recognizes that each person has a different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. The theme of 2023 has been selected to highlight the importance of collective activism. The theme also challenges gender stereotypes, calling out discrimination, drawing attention to bias, and seeking out inclusion. Forging gender equity is not limited to solely women. Allies are incredibly important for the social, economic, cultural, and political advancement of women too. As far as London Borough of Hounslow is concerned, equality does exist in women in our council. First of all, we have got a CEO, Mandy Skinner, as well as we have many um, directors, assistant directors, and other staff members which are represented by women, as well as I'm very proud to say that the Labour Party also encourages women to participate in their political system. Out of 52 councillors, we have 20 women, and I'm very proud of that. And there's something else I would add personally, and that's my experience, and that is a woman can change a man as well. As well, behind every man's success, there is a woman, and you all should be proud of it. Now, I take you to some of the housekeeping rules, which are simple. Please put your phones on silent, and there are no alarms today, fire alarms. If there are any, there are lifts in the lobby, and you can be directed downstairs to that. Um, and we will be having roaming microphones, and if anybody wants to speak, can speak. We will be taking some pictures, and if anybody does not want to be included in that, please do so. As well as the toilets on the main lobby, which are on the either side of the lifts. Refreshments will be provided in at the end of the event. The agenda for this afternoon is, sorry, I'm a bit sweating today. It's a bit hot here. We will be having an introduction by our CEO, Assistant CEO, Mandy Skinner, which will be followed by um, the three guest speakers from the Afghan and Central Asian Association, She-Wise, and from the Domestic and Sexual Violence team at the Council. There will then be a panel of discussion, which will be chaired by our deputy leader, Catherine Dunn. I'm sorry, our deputy leader is also a woman. Yeah. Right. And so first, I may introduce Mandy, please. I welcome Mandy. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Gurwal. Sort of promoted there for a moment, but it's all taken away from me quite quickly. So no, thank you very much. And oh wow, what a fantastic turnout! Really brilliant to see so many people. We host a lot of these days here in Hounslow, and that's one of the reasons why I'm incredibly proud to work for this council, is that we really do see the importance of these events and having all of you here. And we've got lots of councillors and officers as well. And Celia tells me there's another event this evening for entrepreneurial women. So yeah, really proud to work for an organisation that takes these days so incredibly seriously. And as Councillor Gurwal said, it really is about celebration. It's about recognising the achievements of women, but it is also about recognising the work that remains to be done to accelerate parity for women. Events like this are really important because they do raise awareness and they are inspiring, and I just get inspired by looking around the room. But there is absolute seriousness about what this council is about in terms of taking this agenda forward. So a little bit of history for me, just as part of the introduction. International Women's Day started in 1911, supported by over 1 million people then across Europe. And look at it now, really sort of, a global event that involves everyone and anyone in terms of taking the agenda forward. And whilst it's a day to celebrate and a day to recognise the achievements, I think we do have to recognise that actually many of these achievements were not easily succeeded upon. They weren't easy successes, and many women, individually and collectively through groups and supported by communities, have had to take this fight very seriously. So each year, International Women's Day has a theme. Going back to 2016, the theme then was Pledge for Parity. Really important in terms of developing the idea about women's equality and developing an inclusive mindset. In 2021, we were asked to choose to challenge. Again, really important. It's about actively watching out for and calling out inequality. And in 2022, the aim then was about breaking the bias, looking out for and calling out conscious and unconscious bias. All of the themes remain important. They're not one-offs, they're not just for the year, they remain important now. But as Councillor Gairawala said, this year's theme is Embrace Equity. So it stimulated some debate about, well, what's the difference between equality and equity? Is it really important? Well, I think, again, as Councillor Gairawala said, it is really important because whilst I think there's been a lot of success in terms of equality of opportunity and equality of access to resources, equity really does ask us to think about the individual circumstances of women, to understand the difference and to think about how we can support women against those different circumstances. So it really is about embracing the opportunity in order that women can achieve the same outcomes, not just have the same opportunity. And this, again, is really important to the council because I know that many of you here will know we're in the midst of developing our new equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. And just last year, we went out to engage with residents. We spoke to 1,500 people through community groups, individually, stakeholders, partners. And we heard a lot of things. In relation to women, we heard some really important messages about access to women's healthcare, about access to women's mental health care, access to employment and skills. A lot of very, very important messages. And now we're looking in detail at everything we heard. We're looking at the evidence and we're developing that strategy over the next few months. So again, really important that we keep in touch with you there. Bit of a call out for that whole inclusive strategy, but particularly drawing it back to women. We want to make sure that this is a strategy for the long term. It's about understanding and addressing systematic and structural issues and addressing them. It will therefore be something that is generational. We want to look ahead as a council and understand what we can do to really tackle inequality through addressing inequity. But at the same time, that strategy will also have some short-term issues. We're not going to wait until the end. It will be about tackling issues as we know them as well, taking action, putting interventions in place, be that about skills and employment, be that about the health issues, and also about keeping women and girls safe. Some of you, I know, very avid readers of council cabinet reports. Last year, the council agreed a new violence against women and girls strategy. We know that keeping women and girls safe will remain an issue. Collaboration and partnership is also really important for the council. Just towards the end of last year, as part of our work on the engagement of the EDI strategy, we set up the Women's Equality Partnership with our local women's and community groups and stakeholders, again, to actively support and reach out to women, but also to engage and consult. So that will be a forum which continues throughout the development of our strategy and beyond. And here at the council, we have our own Women's Equality Network, first formed in 2020 and actually launched on Women's Day in 2021. So as part of today's event, we'll be hearing about the success of women in our borough, great panelists and speakers. We'll be understanding what we can do together to further the cause. but it is about unity, it is about celebration, and it is about reflection. So really important that we hear again from all of you, your stories, your understandings, your issues, and how we can take them on board when we're developing our equality, diversity, and inclusion strategy. Thanks so much for coming. I know you've got some great speakers and a great panel chaired by Councillor Dunn. So I really hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Our next speaker for this afternoon is Sharon Evans. She runs integration training classes and women's empowerment courses for the Afghanistan and Central Asian Association. She was head of partnership and volunteering for ACAA and is an advisor to police across the United Kingdom on diversity, inclusion, and safeguarding issues affecting women and children. Working with the police, Sharon set up a national education program which teaches children how to manage the risk of violence, bullying, abuse, drugs, and knife crime, which is supported by the Home Office. She and her husband, Neil, a former police officer, set up and ran a home for vulnerable families for Richmond Council. She is a former TV presenter who worked at the Sky News and BBC. I would now like to welcome Sharon, please, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to say it's really fantastic to be here, and I agree with the previous speakers that it's really exciting to have so many women and men in the room that really care about this. And this morning I was at the Royal Albert Hall launching International Women's Day with the Afghanistan and Central Asian Association. And I run women's empowerment and integration courses with ACAA, but we don't just help women from the Afghan culture, we help women across the whole borough and women from all over the world. So for me, empowerment and equality are just words, but what brings them to life is having access to education, to being safe, and having freedom to make choices. And it really saddens me. I'm working in the bridging hotels with the women. And although they've escaped the Taliban, they still do not believe they are equal to their husbands. But I am hopeful because they're coming to the integration classes, they are listening, and it's fantastic that the council has given us the opportunity to run these classes in the hotels so the women don't have to come out of the hotel and they have that opportunity. And I would just like to say that this is I don't give praise where it's not due, but this council has really gone the extra mile. And I've seen the mayor, Councillor Greywell, Celia, Arvine, they come out, they come and meet people, and they really care about the work, and that means a lot. So for me, what's important is that empowerment and equality comes from the ability to have a choice, to make a choice. And you can't control every situation that is presented to you, but you can control how you respond to it. So I firmly believe if you want to see change, then the change starts with you. So I thought that I would share some moments in my life when I had the freedom to make a choice. I grew up in a mixed race house, the daughter of an Anglo-Indian refugee from Jamshedpur in India and his English wife. The lady in this photograph is my auntie, who was one of the powerful women in my life who inspired me. I grew up in a house with a culture which from my grandmother dictated that my mother be a good girl and keep the secret that my father and grandfather were extremely violent to all the women in the house. My grandfather was also a paedophile. So between the ages of 3 and 7, when my mum managed to escape, I was not only subjected to violence, but also sexual abuse. I was very lucky that my mother eventually chose to ask for help and to go to live with her own mother, because my father tried to pour boiling oil onto her. And she knew that if she didn't leave, that he would kill her, because domestic violence is not an argument that's gone wrong. It's a continued pattern of behavior. And that's what I am passionate about helping women to see. It's nothing to do with them. It's a pattern that people follow. So as a child, I felt invisible and like I didn't matter and I had no voice. I was also struck by how my mother never said no and she never fought back, because that's what the power and control does. So I vowed that I would always fight back in whatever way I could. And I vowed that I would have a voice. So this is me when I was 7 and I was in a classroom, and I used to wonder why no adult would make things that were happening to me stop. But I was lucky we went to live with my grandmother, my other grandmother, and my grandfather. And at the time, I couldn't read or tell the time because of the trauma that I suffered. But once my mother was safe, everything kind of fell into place, and we were watching the television news, Thames News at the time. And my grandmother said, you know, you read the news, you read so well now that I think you could read the news. And we were watching Andrew Gardner, who was the first person for ITV to read the news. And here I am with Andrew, age 22, when I read the news for the first time. And I'm really passionate about people understanding that when you don't have the heart or the energy to dream for yourself, other people can give you dreams and aspirations. I went on at 22, excuse the horrendous hairstyles and massive earrings. I think I was probably receiving satellite on those earrings. But I worked at ITV, BBC, and Sky. And I can assure you that it's a constant battle for equality in a television newsroom. And whilst you see many women on your screens, there are not many women at the top. I was once told by one of the executives when he asked for my opinion in a meeting, so I gave it to him. Later on, my driver was driving him home, and he informed my driver that he thought that I might not be made cut out for the BBC because I seemed too confrontational for housewives. So I think I should put that on my CV. On my way to the BBC studios, I had a car crash, head-on car crash, and nearly died. And when I was trapped in the car, I didn't think, darn, I hadn't read news at 10, which is what I thought I would want to do with my life. I felt really disappointed in myself because I felt I hadn't made a difference. And so I vowed that if I lived, that I would do something different with my life. And I made the decision to start talking about what had happened to me as a child. And I started my own charity for children. I think when you change your intention and you make different choices, different opportunities come. And this was Sir John Stevens, who was the Commissioner of the Met Police at the time. And I was on the news, and he asked me if I would help the Metropolitan Police by chairing the first domestic violence conference, which was for 600 people with John Jay College from New York. And it was the first time that the police had stood beside women and said, this is a crime. It's no longer a women's issue. So it was a massive moment for me. I then realized that if we don't change something in school, then we are not going to make change happen. And it's not enough for our children to learn maths and English and science. They need to learn these things in school. So I created, with the help of ITN, a cartoon character, a friend to children called .com. And we teach children in the .com program that we all have the right to feel safe. Others have the right to feel safe with us. And there is nothing so awful or so small we can't tell someone. So we're giving children the skills to ask for help. As I said, there is not equality in newsrooms. It is not, however, the fault of my colleagues. And I was very grateful when I left ITV that people like Sir Trevor MacDonald supported me, and Nicholas Owen here. We made an advert in the News at 10 studio. So you can always make a choice about how you do things and make your point. Other celebrity friends like Linda Bellingham, who sadly is passed now, helped me to raise profile of the work that I was doing, because her husband, you may have read it in the news, was also very violent, and people like Sir Alistair Stewart also helped, and she helped me to raise the profile of the work. Also using venues like New Scotland Yard to actually introduce the resources and do press conferences with Sir Trevor. Also, when you change your vibration in terms of the choices that you're making, it is truly astonishing the people that come into your life. And nobody was more surprised than me when I was told that Nelson Mandela had heard about .com and would like her to help the children of South Africa. I honestly felt like Forrest Gump, you know, and then I met the president. And I was actually asked to go to South Africa, and I met Mr. Mandela on several occasions, and we created a character called Bongani for South African children. And I went and had the privilege to meet many, many girls and children in Africa, and be with Mr. Mandela on a campaign trail to change the way people treated children, particularly with disabilities. I also, one of the things when you're a newsreader that you're able to do is access powerful people. So I accessed the Prime Minister at the time, who helped me to launch .com, and still now, 20 years later, is still a supporter of the work that I do. Then there was the next Prime Minister, so you have to keep going with politics. Then there was the Mayor who became the Prime Minister, who also supported my work. I was also told that I would never get the support of the Department for Education because they don't support these kinds of things. So when Ed Balls was Secretary of State for Education, I was very proud to receive the endorsement of the department and extremely proud to be asked to speak at the United Nations on the Committee for the Abolition of Slavery. Also, another challenging project, the Foreign Office and the Met Police asked me to make a film about FGM, female genital mutilation, and I worked with children and young people to create a film that is available now. Also used the power of celebrities and Strictly to actually raise the power of the work. And also Dionne Warwick became our global ambassador because many people, everybody has a story, and many people don't feel confident or comfortable to share the fact they've been victims of abuse, but they will do things to help you. I am passionate about standing up here and not being ashamed to tell you that this happened to me because I was the victim of a crime. And if you're a victim of a crime, there is no need for shame. It is not your shame, it's the shame of the person that created that crime. So many of my colleagues and friends at television news have continued to help and support my work. And just recently, we've created the digital version of the .com programme, working with Microsoft and the police, which was launched at the British Education Technical Trade Show. This is also noted by the Home Office and in DFE online guidance. This is a very proud photograph for me because it was a big decision when I decided to talk about what happened to me when the police asked me to do so. One of my colleagues said, "You need to really think carefully about this." And I said, "Well, I know that." And she said, "No, but you're a newsreader." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, newsreaders are supposed to be pretty, aren't they? And you're going to talk about something that's really ugly." And I said, "Well, if the job's worth having, then I should be able to talk about it and keep my job." And I made the decision that if I'd helped one child by coming out and talking about this. My friends in the news called it my coming out about what had happened to me. With the .com programme, this is the first little girl that was helped by the programme, and she disclosed at school that she was being abused, and her mother and she have been proud for her to stand beside me and feel that she doesn't have to be ashamed because of what happened to her. These are my own children. I have twins. They are both high-functioning autistic, but they are very much proud of the work that we do and very much part of, I know, what's going to be the next generation. When I went to my school, the school to hear from the teachers, one of my proudest moment was not my daughter's academic achievements, but that they told me that she doesn't really have any problems with the boys like some of the other girls because she's very assertive and she has very clear boundaries. My job is done. Thank you. And I was very privileged to make a TED talk, so you can actually watch more about my journey with .com and the work that I do with women there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon, so much for talking on this important topic as well as sharing your life with us. Our next speaker today is Saida Ashraf, and she's the co-founder of SheWise. SheWise is a local organization, women's organization that supports the educational, economical, social development, and mental wellness of South Asian and Middle Eastern women and young girls with the aim to help women on their journey to heal, have the opportunity to economic independence, and build their lives. I would now like to welcome Saida, please. Thank you.
Thank you. everyone first of all, for Hounslow Council for inviting She Wise here today. It is an absolute honor for us as an organization to be recognized for the kind of work that we're doing. So once again, thank you so much. And it's an honor for me to have this stage and just really share my journey, because I think each one of us in this room have our own journey, and especially women, we have a very contrast journey. Some of us have similar experiences and others are very different. My journey really, in terms of equality, I'm from a Pakistani Muslim background. My family migrated to UK in the 70s. My father migrated in the early 60s, and we joined him in the mid 70s. So I came here as a very young child. Coming from a developing country at the time, Pakistan, coming to the Western world was the first country, as to say, the first world, was a very contrast experience of confusion, really, confusion of my identity. Coming from a school where all my friends looked like me, spoke like me, dressed like me, to a country where nobody looked like me, very few. And we came and lived in the heart of central London, where there were very few Asian families. And I think in a school, I went to an all-girls school, both in primary and secondary school, I think I was the only child, or maybe three other children who shared the same skin color as me or the same background. So you can imagine the complex of understanding who I am and where I come from, and my own identity was always an issue. And growing through that culture of coming from a South Asian, in itself was quite complex, because my faith was Muslim, which is sort of adopted from the Middle East, but my culture was South Asian, which is adopted by Asia. So the two clashed, the values clashed, and that clash obviously created a lot of complex thoughts and ideologies in my head in terms of where I really belonged. But my first real encounter of inequality was at the age of 17, almost going on to 18, when I completed my A-levels and I wanted to go to university to study law. And I was told by my father that actually you can't do that. And the reason was that you can't live away from home, because the university I had got an admission in was in Leeds, and there was no way a young girl of my age could live on campus all by herself. So that was my real encounter of personal gender bias, whereas my brother was completely allowed to do whatever he wanted. He was actually, at the age of 16, who was younger than me, was traveling the world. He was a karate black belt, and he was going to Czechoslovakia, Russia, all across Russia and different parts of Europe, traveling, and I was not even allowed to go to university. So that was my real personal experience. However, my outer world was very different, because I grew up at a time when women were really being empowered. I grew up in the era of the Iron Lady, which is Margaret Thatcher, and she was one of the world's most strongest women that we know even today. And it wasn't just here in Britain. When I looked across subcontinent, we had women like Indira Gandhi in India. And we had women like Hasina Sheikh in Bangladesh. And then we had the uprising of Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan. So there was a real complex about what was this all about? And then suddenly I used to hear this word about feminism. What is feminism? And I was buzzing. I mean, when I first understood what little I knew about feminism, I was, this is it. This is what I believe in, women's equality. And then I started going around telling everybody I'm a feminist, because it looks good, not really understanding what feminism really means. Is it just about getting a vote, being allowed to have a vote? Is that what it was about? And then I looked at all the articles and what the media was portraying, but actually, feminism at that time was very exclusive to white women. Where were the South Asian women? Where were our voices? Nobody was talking about us. Nobody was talking about the culture, our personal experience of feminism. Anyway, fast forward a few years when I had an arranged marriage and my partner came from abroad, that was where I really started experiencing the negativeness and the real constraints of being a woman in today's world, coming from a South Asian society. My religion, which to me, which I had discovered, self-discovered, used to talk about feminism as women who were basically got rights to inherit property almost 1500 years ago. They had the right to marriage, they had the right to choose their own partners, they even had the right to keep their own name, which even the Western world wasn't practicing. Some of the rights that my religion had given me 1500 years ago, I still didn't see the Western values practicing that or the Western culture practicing that. But I didn't see it in my own culture and I didn't see it in my own family. And then we had the Asian culture. And then I grew up watching Bollywood movies, which was completely astonishing because love for women was defined as sacrifice, right? All the women, if you wanted to be a good wife, then you had to sacrifice. You had to allow the man to treat you the way he wanted to treat you, because that was the symbolness of love. Being a doormat was part of being this sacrificed woman who would do anything for her man. That was the privilege. But even there, even within the Indian culture, there was so much contradiction, because actually I got inspired by the Hindu goddess, which was the Durga. She was the woman of power. And how comes that was such a contrast in they were worshipping women as goddess, but yet in practice we were treated like doormats. The whole confusion, and still to this day, I have to say the confusion hasn't cleared up for me. But it really does make me wonder where the South Asian women stand in the complex of all of this. And where does feminism actually is with all of that? Just going back to my journey after when I got married, my economic situation forced me. I didn't really, by that time I had lost my ambition to have a career. Just thought, you know what? Don't rock the boat, just have your kids, just do the family role, just do what is expected of you. But economic needs forced me to go out to work. And when I did go out to work, I went on a journey of self-discovery. I started getting into retail and realized when I was talking to people, actually how much others appreciated me and how much of a business-minded woman I was, and started looking at different started desiring the desire for ambition actually started to reoccur, that, you know what, I can do something, I can be something. And soon as I started to embark that journey of personal development and started investing back into my education, into my skills, I realized I was confronted with another barrier, which was my partner. And and how dare I, as a woman, be much more successful in my career than him. I started my own business from grounds upwards. It was a struggle. It was in the catering industry. I was working ridiculous hours with 2 young children, but I was doing damn well. I was really making my mark, but that wasn't acceptable by my partner. He could not see me be more successful, be at board meetings, be at talking to senior CEOs, bringing in hundreds of pounds worth of contracts into the business. He could not cope with that. And that's where the cycle of domestic abuse. It started off with verbal abuse. Then it started off with one smack on the hand, and then on the back. And then it just became regular, day after day. And that's how it starts, right? So there were times when I got up having experienced this. So there'd be the night before where he'd be drunk and he would take out his stress on me, and I would take it in. And then the next morning, because I was the strong woman, coming from the era of the Iron Lady, I could take anything on. So I would put on my cape and think, you know what, I can do this, put on a face, put on a mask, and end up in all these board meetings with a room full of male, pretending to be trying to think or believe that I belong there. But actually, they also made me feel that I didn't belong there, because I was that woman who only knew how to cook. I didn't really know how to run a business. And my confidence, my lack of confidence, because I always felt I was incomplete without my degree, always made me question my self-worth. Do I really belong in this room? So I would give my power away of decision-making of my own business to others. Oh, they may know better, because I didn't believe in myself. That journey later ended with me, once my confidence was eroded completely and I had completely given my power away. And at home, I lost the power too. That whole journey of 10 years of running my business, which was actually a very successful business, which I had started from ground upwards, and it became the number 7th most popular food service in UK across Britain. I could not uphold it anymore, because all the constraints that I was dealing with on a daily basis, I had to walk away from that. So the business went into administration in 2019. I ended up with a lot of legal battle with some of the partners that I was working with. And if I go into all of that, we'll be here until tomorrow morning, so I won't do that. But that journey, once I lost the business, really made me reflect as a woman the kind of constraints that we as women face, and we as South Asian women face. What is the price of success for us? How are we ever going to be able to succeed? Are we ever actually going to be accepted by our communities if we do become successful? Once I started looking at this area, and that's when I conceptualized SheWise, which was really focused on making South Asian women, Black women, financially independent, because at the time I thought that would solve our problem for us to become financially independent. Little did I know, when I was working with some of the most strong, powerful women in their own right, that when they were running their business, they too were experiencing what I had experienced. Their male counterpartners, their husbands, could not cope with their success. It dawned upon me once when I had a young lady who, it was her 3rd attempt to start her own business. And we were doing her business plan, and we were trying to work out what was working and what wasn't working. And I was asking her, she was saying that, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that. And it made me realize, and I said to her, have you actually asked your partner if he wants you to do this business? And it dawned upon her through our conversations and the question that I asked, the 2 previous businesses that had failed were due to her partner, because he wouldn't allow her to go out and meet other male. He wouldn't allow her to integrate with community, or wouldn't allow her to do the activities that she needed to do to make her business successful. And I could see it in her face and in her eyes. It certainly dawned upon her that if she was to establish this business and make it successful, she would have to make a choice of staying married or being a successful businesswoman. And I could see that she was totally confused. And I didn't tell her what to do. That was her choice. She had to make that decision. But it made me realize that how many of us South Asian women especially have to make that choice all the time. It's either our marriage or it's either our dreams, our ambitions. And this is the gray shades. This is why I look at feminism, the gray shades of feminism. And I think the problem with feminism is, during this journey, when I have spoken to men and I have spoken about what feminism means to me, I often get remarks like, oh, male hater, oh, male bashing, is it? And if you say one word against them, that's how they label you, and that's how they see you. And you're almost always looked upon as the B word, if you know what I mean. if you are a woman of power. So these are some of the issues that I feel with women equality and feminism, that there's a lot of shades of gray there. And having now worked with almost hundreds and hundreds of women coming from South Asian background, a lot of our stories are the same. A lot of us, and those women who choose to empower themselves, those women who go on a journey of self-empowerment, actually often end up breaking away from their marriages. So what's the solution? And for me, the solution is getting more male involved in this conversation. We need more men to stand up and have these conversations in their circles, in their networks. Why these conversations are only in a room full of women? Why aren't male having these conversations? And I think, again, there is a fundamental responsibility that lies on the shoulders of the women. It's because we only choose to have them with women. We don't actually have these conversations with our men in any form, whether it's our brother, whether it's our partner, whether it's our father, whether it's just our work colleagues. We choose not to have them because we think that they're not relevant to them. But that's the heart of the issue. The conversation has to be happening. We need to have them with our male counterpartners in all these arenas. And that's what I want the women today to encourage is, please, if you're a mother or if you're a sister or if you're just a wife, go home and have these conversations. Look for that opportunity where you can have that conversation regularly with your partners, with the males in your family. So it's constantly, and get them to understand and get them to and share these stories. So this is my sort of take on feminism. I know there's a lot of women in the room who will classify themselves as feminist, and I'm the biggest feminist probably in this room, but I will say that feminism now really needs to change. It can't be just about few basic rights of equality. It's not about that. I think feminism today, to me, has to look at the woman as a whole and look at woman as a journey that she embarks upon, whether it's about her choosing to be a single woman and having a career. The society and the world needs to cater for that, or whether it's a woman who chooses to have a family and chooses to be a mother, a stay-at-home mother. The world and the society needs to cater for that. There's a lot of disparities at the moment in the law where women who choose to stay at home and stay married and have a family, those women are often far less economically well off to those women who choose to move away from relationships. And this is really a topic which is very close to our heart, my heart actually, where we actually think, what is the government policies currently actually doing to the status of women? I'm all for believing in economic empowerment for women, but for South Asian women, often that means double the work. So they go out and work, and they go back home and they still work. And what does that really mean? Is that really empowering women, or are we becoming twice as much more labor? Are we being paid for work that we're not really being substantially being paid for or being recognized for? So there are a lot of conversations and there are a lot of topics, and I could be here all day talking about this, but I would urge each and every one of you to really go back and really think about the woman's journey in all her diversity, whatever choices she chooses to make. I think women empowerment and feminism needs to be at the heart of that. So thank you so much. I hope it makes some sense in terms of what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Saida, for your insightful piece about South Asian feminism in the community and sharing your experience in life. And I really support your cause, and you have really enlightened people what goes through many of the Asian women in our society and in our culture. And thank you very much for bringing that up. Next up, we have today, the next speaker is Lucia Espaniala, who is the team leader of Hounslow Domestic and Sexual Violence. outreach service at the council. Lucia has worked at the council for almost 8 years, has worked supporting women in refuge in London, and is passionate about women's equality, co-chairing the Women's Equality Network for internal staff at the council. I will now welcome Lucia. Please.
Well, thank you. I might need to take a breath to focus on my speech after the level of the speakers. I easily got distracted and inspired and wanted to jump in different conversations. But today, yeah, as the councillor said, I'm part of the Domestic and Sexual Outreach Service, which is a really passionate team. And I've been lucky to work with them over almost 8 years, and it's touching based on all the conversations we're having. But today I'm here representing the Women Equality Network and to talk about the theme for equity in the workplace and trying to bring a little bit of awareness. So let me just make sure I can follow the slides, as I said, just to focus. So first of all, I wanted to, as I'm part of the Women Equality Network today, just to show you things that we've been trying to implement in the workplace in Hounslow, as echoing what everyone is saying, that I think I'm proud and lucky to be working in the council, taking very seriously equality, diversity. They are promoting lots of equality networks to have a voice heard, to celebrate special days like I'm celebrating today for Women's Day. And so far, we've been trying to raise some awareness of the issues that affect women, especially in the workplace. Also holding the organization to account, trying to challenge discriminatory culture, providing the support and network for all career and broader life challenges, and promote women as leaders. So for me today is also a huge honor and privilege, but also a responsibility to try to bring a little bit more of awareness on a special day like today, and also to gather more members to the network, that we really need them. And as everyone is saying, the room is still full of women, so I will invite men to join together the networks, because it's also a fact that the networks in the council are mainly run by women, represented by women. So it's not just us having to, it's great to celebrate, but when it becomes about bringing awareness, making change, I think we should work together. So I will invite all the gentlemen in the room and the rest of the building to join us and keep changing together. So today is 8th of March, but going back to the first 8th of March in the millennium, Mandy already went through different themes for the last few years, but the theme that we had on the 8th of March in 2000, if just to refresh the memory, it was a huge global strike, currently over more than 50 countries. So it was to stop. So the thing was, if women stop, the world will stop. So the aim of that day, 8th of March, was to bring awareness of the salary gap, low paid, non-pay. It was really interesting because, as I said, over more than 50 countries from America to Asia, Africa to Europe, different countries came up with different initiatives to spread the voice, to stop for one day doing household chores, going to work, or even shopping. So obviously that will have a huge impact, but also they come with different initiatives. For instance, in Argentina, they decided to hang the brooms outside the windows. In Nigeria, they come with this idea about we should have a pay day for all the unpaid work that we've been doing. And in many countries in Europe and in Asia as well, they decided to join the global strike that had a huge impact on raising awareness, especially on the topic that I'm going to speak today in the workplace, because I'm a huge advocate of financial independence for women. That ending with, that was the intention, to bring that awareness, to try to end towards poverty that is really closely related with domestic violence. So let me just, I'm going too quick and then I'm going to be done in 5 minutes and I don't want to go that. So I'm going to take a few moments just to make sure I'm not jumping on anything. So it was just a fact that just alone in the UK, it was estimated that the unpaid and unwaged work was over 700 billion pounds. So that fact, and I'm not going to keep on statistics or anything like that, but it brought my attention on how much that the money that comes to the unpaid work that women are doing, and not just the Asian woman, is always full job and outside the work office, going back to the unpaid full-time job. So those numbers, and that was back in 2000, were estimated from different researches, studies, and also initiated by insurance companies that initially wanted to somehow measure the unpaid work of a wife when that was going to die for that man. So how much that man will get the unpaid work, if that makes sense, because obviously the salary gap is related with the pension, huge pension gap for women that are widows, and again leaving them really vulnerable in poverty and with lack of resources, and creating huge imbalances in the society. So that was the intention from this strike, to launch the petition for equity pay, for equal opportunities in the workplace, and yes, to keep working for forward in a better world. So today, as Mandy already mentioned, 23 years later, we are still having the chat. I always like to think that we are making positive steps, and always think of myself quite optimistic, but still we are not satisfied with the slow progress. And it's interesting that we've been just in the pandemic for 2 years, that we've been so resilient to change the whole process of working differently, relating differently, doing things online, doing things in a way that we never did before. So how come it's taking still 23 years to get these things moving forward? As I said, there are lots of positive things and steps, and again, I'm proud to be in a passionate team in the council that is taking this seriously, but there is still some steps to make to achieve that. So as Mandy said, the theme this year is equity, and I'm going to spend maybe just some time, because equality and equity, obviously there are different terms that sometimes is not easy to use them correctly. So I'm just going to, I think that the illustration shows perfectly well what the differences are, because obviously equality will give everyone the same opportunities. That's the main outcome, the main desire that we all want, is to reach equal opportunities, equal outcome, equal well-being. But that's not enough, because we are not all equal. We are coming from different backgrounds, different countries, different um, ages or capabilities. So equity is now the way to go forward, especially everywhere, but especially as I'm part of the Women Equality Network for the Council today, is in the workplace, that equity recognizes that each person is different, therefore they need different things to reach the same outcome. So I love the illustration, because of course, if you give everyone a bike, it doesn't mean they are going to be able to ride it, or it doesn't mean they are going to be able to reach same far. So you have to provide the specific bike, the specific thing for everyone, the specific appropriate tools for everyone to be able to reach the same outcome. That especially will mean that we all have equal opportunities in life. So how can we, and I've been trying to regroup everything that I've been reading lately to prepare myself and to do the homework, and steps, 4 basic steps to work towards equity in the workplace. So obviously, there are 4 ingredients in the recipe. So diversity is we are so lucky in London. It's such a diverse city, and coming from Spain, Madrid, which is also quite diverse, but even more lucky that we are in Hounslow, which is probably more of one of the most diverse borough. So diversity is always, as Hounslow say, hand the mix. It's really important because the more diverse, the more ideas, the more innovation. So we have to really make sure we embrace diversity with everything that comes with it. But diversity, like equality and equity, might not be good enough. So the next step is inclusion, because you can have diversity, but it doesn't mean if you don't work with that, if you don't use that diversity, you might lose the innovation, the ideas that comes from that. So inclusion is really the second ingredient that is really important, because if everyone in a diverse company like Hounslow, for residents and for the workers in the council, you embrace that diversity and you make people to feel included, despite of the difference. My accent might be an asset. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Is it working, the micro? Is that working? Oh, okay. Just realize it now. Okay. I hope, did anyone hear what I said? Thank you. Sorry. Of course, talking about equity. Yeah. So, yeah, inclusion. I think that if we make the most of the diverse workforce or residents, and to make everyone feel welcome and included, we people will feel they belong, they can contribute, they can keep motivated, and obviously the turnout will be less, because if people feel that they belong, they can change things, they can feel heard. That's the second ingredient. Equality, I already mentioned. Equality, obviously, we need to, apart from the basics, we have to have equal opportunities, equal policies, equal procedures to make sure that there is fairness in the workplace. But again, as I said before, equality is not good enough if it's not equity. So the big companies, and I didn't want it to get people bored in statistics or companies, but just an example, even Tesco is already using equity. So every little helps, like Tesco says. So as I said already, when you put equity in the workplace, you are going to get much better achievements towards innovation. And now that we are talking not just about, I know that today is about women and Women's Day, but all equality networks is like an intertransactional, it affects everyone, but also the new talks about environment. So the big topics that are happening now, when you get equity in the workplace, you will get much more, with people feeling included, belonging, appreciating the diversity, and recognizing that everyone might need different things to make the most of the roles or the jobs. As I said, equity-based solutions, sorry, I can't focus on it's a long-term solution. And because today we are focusing on women, is a fact that one of the things we've been doing in the Women Equality Network is talking for many problems that affect women in the workplace, like could be menopause, could be maternity leave, that it shouldn't be called maternity leave anymore, maybe a little change on family leave. So little change will promote big changes in the workplace. For instance, there is current campaigns going on trying to reach some equity in the workplace. So one is never mind the gender gap career. So in the recruitment process, for instance, when we are trying to advertise jobs, could be a simple step as not asking for how many years have you been away, because it's normally women that have to stop their careers to look after children or family or elderly parents or even a community. So instead of asking how many years have you been absent from your job, could be asking for the skills. Or there are also other single steps like in the interview questions, something that I found that was really interesting is like for men, the questions are more lead to growth. Like they will be asked questions such as, what would you do if you could do, or if you could reach the sky, for instance. But for women, it's more about challenges, about what would you do if this barrier comes to you, or so that's already somehow having some unconscious bias on the way we are recruiting people or interviewing people. So simple steps might change, might provoke a huge change. And it's not about the mindset. I think it's about the mechanics, because I think that it's a fact nowadays that women have proved that they can do anything they want. They've got the mindset to start a business, to speak up, as Sharon said, like about her own experience. We are brave enough. We've got mindset. We've got ideas. We've got so many ways to become independent, even in the worst of a struggle. Coming from the domestic violence team, it shows me how many women came from really horrible places and become completely independent. So I think it's not the mindset that we have to change; it's the mechanics on the towards the equity in the workplace. Just to finish, I think, as I said about the Hounslow core values, obviously they are completely related with the equity, because when you lead with the heart, it means you are compassion, you are able to see and to embrace that diversity, to include people, to have empathy. That's when you lead with the heart. So I think that's the main ingredient, as I said, working towards the equity. When you try to do new, you can't do new if you don't have diverse, if you don't have new ideas from young and elderly, from Asia, Africa, England, and Spain. So you have to be open to change. You have to be open to different way and ideas, and that's coming from the diverse workforce we've got in Hounslow. When you want to pass the power as well, it's time to share the power with women. I know that the counselor said that is true. There are lots of women, but they are also still here challenging the culture. So yeah, I think it will be good to have more women as well, and men sharing equally the main roles and passing the power. So again, to pass the power, one of the things that the Women Equality Network wanted to do, that I think it will be another steps working towards gender equity, will be mentoring. Mentoring will be a great way. And again, that's something, there are lots of talks in different companies about mentoring young people from senior leaders, but also having the young people, their voice to be heard. I know that there is a Young Equality Network that they've got so many fresh ideas, ways to do, especially moving to the digital era that we are moving. I'm talking to myself. I really embrace young people. My team is there. They can tell that. So we really need to mentor people, but vice versa, from senior leaders to have young people to be heard and to be the leaders in the new. Harness the mix, as I said, is about diversity and equity and equality, and then we will be a rock. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Lucia, for talking about the importance of gender equity at work, and especially at London Borough of Hounslow. I can assure you that we maintain that, and we will maintain that in future. Our next guest speaker is Satuja Sethi and Sujata Sethi. Sorry. She wants to share some of her stories with us on domestic abuse with women, please. Yeah, you're welcome.
Sorry, I'm not the tallest person in the room. I hope everybody is able to see me. So I'm really grateful to Shivais to give me the opportunity. I'm a photographer. So they gave me the opportunity to collaborate with survivors of domestic violence to create a series that is on display today. We have named it Main Mukammal, which translates to I am enough. It's a series that brings to light narratives of South Asian women who have experienced domestic violence, who are based here in the UK. And we would really encourage you to please go ahead and look at the series, see the stories that we have captured, and share it as much as you can. We've really put our heart and soul in it. We've interviewed the survivors, they've shared their narratives with us, and they are very heart-wrenching narratives, which we have sort of encapsulated not only in images, but also in poetic verses. So I'd just like to very briefly read one verse to you. And also, before I say that, I'm very grateful that I get this opportunity to speak, and not that I prepared for it. But this series is very important for me as I come from a lived experience of domestic violence. I grew up watching domestic violence in my house. And at the age of 3, I was sexually abused for the very first time by my cousins. And it went on for a very, very long time until one day when I realized that it's not my fault. I did not bring it upon myself. And that was the very first time I came out about it and spoke about my own sexual abuse. But I remember the day when I first spoke about it to my mother. She stopped me and she said, "Don't tell this to your father. We don't want our name in the society to be tainted." And I don't blame my mother for it. Honestly, I do not. Because it is not my mother who is at fault who said this. It is not perhaps even my father at fault to have been the perpetrator for my mother. I truly believe it is our conditioning. I feel it is our genetic predisposition, and we really need to change it. It is the culture that is bred that teaches us that we need to bow down to men, or that we are not complete until we are married. I believe it is our culture, and I really truly hope that we are able to together change it. And thank you so much to the Hounslow Council for bringing this to light. And please go ahead and look at the exhibition. And I'll just very quickly read one of the quotes that we have written. It says in Urdu, "Kabhi uski aankhon mein, kabhi uske dil mein, और कभी उसके पैरों तले खुद को ढूंढती रही, पर जब खुद के अंदर मुड़ के देखा तो पता चला कि मैं तो मुझ में ही हूँ." Which literally translates to sometimes in his eyes, sometimes in his heart, and sometimes in the space beneath his feet. I went looking for myself, but it was only when I turned my gaze within that I realized that I am within me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sujata, for sharing your experience, and the few lines which you said were really very touching. Now, I would like to welcome the panel for discussion, which is chaired by Councillor Catherine Dunn, and she's also a deputy leader. Catherine Dunn, please.
I don't know if I want to stand. I think I want to sit with you. Okay. So I'm quite familiar with this format. One of the things I do is training for the Labour Women's Network, and we do a session called Question Time, and which I get to chair and channel my inner David Dimbleby or Fiona Bruce and ask some really tricky questions, but I won't be doing that today, don't worry. Not the awkward questions anyway, because today I really want to just give you the chance to talk, to delve a bit deeper on some of those issues that we have already heard about today. So firstly, must do introductions. So in addition to our fantastic speakers, and oh my God, were those some really good and thought-provoking talks. So thank you so much. In addition to our speakers so far, we're also joined by Naomi Hawthorne from Surviving Economic Abuse, and Kamal Dipkaur from Southall Black Sisters. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today. So I think to start off, I mean, we've heard some of your personal journeys already, but I'd really like to hear about what you're doing with your respective organisations. You're all from council partners in the domestic violence abuse sector, and so I'd really like to hear about what you're doing to help women and to help achieve that equity that we've been talking about. Would you like to kick off? You don't have to.
I guess. Yeah, I think this is on. Right, so in regards to SheWise, we sort of, our focus areas, like I said in my talk, we started off really looking at women's economic empowerment. And we very quickly realized that actually that wasn't enough. So we now work in the space of both domestic abuse, mental health, skills development. So we think these are the most key components in terms of helping women as much as we can in terms of our own capacity. But I think, like I said, you know, it's not just about, it is looking at the woman as a whole. And one of the programs that we've now recently launched, which is the Women's Empowered Living Program, which is really about looking at the women individually and looking at their journeys and looking at the skills and the kind of values, I think, really helping her to find herself, what matters to her. And our empowered living model is based on that, and that's the program we run, which is basically a 12-week program that takes her on this empowerment journey of helping her to discover herself, who she is, what she wants from life, what her ambitions are, and really helping her to reach her full potential. That is what we are trying to do. But in that space, we also deal with tackled issues like domestic abuse, mental health, because that's where these women predominantly come from. And that's the experience that they've had often brings them to us. So I hope that answers the question.
So, as I said, if I focus on my role as part of the domestic violence team, obviously for residents, we've got the one-stop shop. We run the Freedom Program. We support many children with Let's Talk, PCDOS in the schools. We are trying, obviously, to make people safe in the borough, and we've got a group of amazing IDVAs, independent domestic violence advocates, and the CADA team. But as today, I was representing the Women Equality Network and talking about equity, because I'm a huge advocate of women to become independent financially, especially because it helps so as I said, the Women Equality Network is trying to bring some awareness to the workplace with the rest of the equality networks by promoting equity, diversity, and equality opportunities for everyone in the council.
So I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware, but I work with Southall Black Sisters. It's a not-for-profit, secular and inclusive organisation, and it was established in 1979 to meet the needs of BME women. Our aims are really to highlight and challenge all forms of gender-based violence and empower them to gain more control over their lives. Also to live without fear of violence and to assert their human rights to justice, equality and freedom. For several decades, BME women continue to face exclusion in all areas of life, from education, health, employment, wellness, and the justice system in Britain. BME women experience overt discrimination, implicit bias, and racism due to a lack of inaccessible and unaffordable housing, education, financial means, and a language and cultural barriers that restrict them from accessing and so basically escaping gender-based violence. All violence such as forced marriage, honor crime, and trafficking and domestic violence. So as a consequence, we run a advice service and an advocacy and resource service in West London. We provide a comprehensive service to all women experiencing violence and abuse and other forms of inequality. We offer special advice, information, casework, counseling, and we also support with self-help support services in several community languages, particularly South Asian languages. We encourage women to empower themselves and to lead independent lives by providing support groups and therapeutic, educational, and social activities which enable them to make new friends, build self-esteem and confidence, and learn life skills to overcome trauma that arise from the experiences that they had. Therefore, we engage in advocacy and we help to promote policies and legislation that advance women's rights.
Hi everyone, my name is Naomi and I'm from the charity Surviving Economic Abuse. So Surviving Economic Abuse was founded in 2017. So we're a relatively new, young charity, only celebrated our 5th birthday in the summer. So essentially, we're the only UK-based charity dedicated to raising awareness of economic abuse and transforming responses to it. So we work in partnership with within the women's sector and within the financial services sector in building their capacity to identify economic abuse when they see it. So for example, if somebody comes into a bank branch and shares concerns about trying to de-link from the perpetrator and de-link their finances. It could be as well within money and debt advice services, training Citizens Advice Bureau, and other services within the local area to raise their awareness around economic abuse and how to spot it. We also work in partnership with a frontline service called Money Advice Plus, and they have a dedicated financial support line for victims and survivors of economic abuse. So anyone who experiences domestic abuse and is in debt as a result of the perpetrator's economic abuse and control can be referred into the financial support line run by MAP, and which we work in partnership with. I think one of the key things that has just come out today, really, throughout all of the talks, is that women's economic safety is at the heart of any kind of integrated approach to tackling violence against women and girls. And really, as an organisation, the change that we want for women is that we want them to be able to access economic resources and be in control of their own economic resources, and that they're economically equal. So we've definitely made some paved some way in terms of influencing legislation. So, for example, within the coercive controlling behaviour, we lobbied government to extend that so that it actually also supports those victim survivors post-separation, because we know that domestic abuse doesn't just end when the victim survivor leaves. Often it can go on for many, many years, and economic abuse is a key tactic used by perpetrators to continue to exert power and control over the victim survivor. So we're working with banks, financial institutions and women's sector and the government to raise awareness about this issue and to hopefully create some change. And all of our work is completely informed by the Experts by Experience group. So this is a group of survivors who have been impacted by economic abuse themselves, and they share with us their views, their experiences, their opinions on what needs to change, and we bring that to the heart of our work, and that leads us on where we go. So really, I also just want to thank Hounslow Council for inviting me today and to be a part of this. It's been really interesting to hear everyone's experiences so far.
So following on from that, because I think it's really, really important, this issue, I run integration classes both at the ACAA Centre, which is in Feltham. Women can come to the classes and they can also come to the centre for help from, we're a kind of citizens advice bureau for many of the most vulnerable women, because they don't feel like they belong and they want to learn how they can have greater control over their lives and how they can fit in. But what was interesting, the first session that I ran, an Afghan lady, and we have women from all over the world, but this Afghan lady came to me because I brought the police in to explain to them how they could be safe in their community and in their homes. And she showed me her phone and said, "This is what happens with my children. Is this okay?" And I was looking at photographs of welts on her children's back and bruises. And I said, it's not only is it not okay, but we do need to report this to the police. And she was really relieved. But what was wonderful about the support that we get from Hounslow Council is what he'd been holding, if I just use this example, what he'd been holding over her was that his name was on the council tenancy. So therefore, she would be sent back to Afghanistan. She would have no money. He was taking her benefits. And she would have no control over her life. So with the help of the council, we have the man has been removed from, and the police, I should say. There's an injunction against him, and the property, she has the right to be in the property with the children. And also we're just in the process of her name being transferred over. But that wouldn't have happened without the funding from Hounslow Council for the integration class, because it gave her the confidence to be able to ask for help. So we do everything from that, and we cover all kinds of issues that women are interested in, to also using my skills from being in the newsroom were very transferable in terms of makeup, hair, confidence, how to walk, all of those things we're able to share with women. And that's why it was such a great celebration to be, we did a fashion shoot with the ladies all dressed up, and that's what was exhibited at the Royal Albert Hall today. So a real range of things, but thank you to the council for the help.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of other questions before I open it up to everyone else in the room who may have some questions. And don't all feel that you have to answer every question. It just kind of, indicate if you want to answer or jump in, because yeah, we'll do it that way. So thank you so much for sharing what the work that you do. And a lot of it is, for the example just described, working with an individual who, who's suffering, oppression and an adverse situation, helping them to overcome that with the help of your organisations in partnership with the council, police, and so on. But it's not just about the individual level. All of these situations arise because of that systemic oppression, and that some of we heard about that in the speeches earlier. So what do you think we can do collectively to help to counter some of that systemic oppression that puts women in these situations in the first place?
I think there's multiple things that we can do as a society as a whole, and like I said, it's to make it really common within families to have these conversations. And I think, again, when a man and a woman decides to come together to have a family, I think that is the point where these conversations become really important. And I think having them embedded as part of the family values as to what does that family represent, whether it's a girl and the boy, I think that's where the conversations really need to start. And that's obviously quite an ideologically kind of sort of a simplifying version of what I think. But I definitely think that the society as a whole needs to look at this whole issue around domestic abuse and oppression of women as a whole, and not as individual in isolation. Women's journey, what women experience in different parts of their journey, has to be looked as a holistic solution rather than dealing with each different parts of it in isolation. It's not just about voting. It's not just about having a crash at work. It's not just about all of these things. It's really looking at different stages of women's journey and where are the critical needs, where are the gaps that the government needs to fill. And I think making these conversations in their personal household is really important, which is our responsibility as citizens, but then also having them at different levels of the arena and the hierarchy, obviously. So that would be my sort of take on this.
Sharon wants to come in.
My passion really is education, because if we don't start educating our children, how are we going to change the next generation? And it's not the fault, if we're going to change culture, it's not the fault of the children if they come from what they believe at home to be correct. But in school, you have this opportunity to give them other ways to think. And it's very frustrating to me that having created a national education program, it's still really difficult to get it into schools because it's seen as PSHE and not so important as maths and English. So, you know, I can't see how we're going to bring about lasting change if we don't start showing our children different ways to be. That's my passion. And I'd love to get it into Hounslow.
Noted.
And just really following on from that and thinking about, you know, my experiences of school and growing up, there wasn't anything on money. There was not one lesson or classroom about savings, about the future, about mortgages, about nothing. So I think really we need to be starting from the basics around financial capability. So that we all have the awareness to be able to make informed decisions about what we do with our economic resources. And also then that will help us be able to identify when somebody's potentially going to exploit our economic resources and how to safeguard ourselves from that.
So education is definitely very, very important. So providing education and raising awareness about these issues, we can help break down stereotypes and we can help break down and address biases. I think legal reforms and policy reforms, just enforcement in general, for example, governments and organizations should enforce existing laws and policies in protecting women's rights and enacting new laws or policies when necessary to protect women. And economic empowerment is again, like she's mentioned, is very important. Providing women with access to education, training, resources, and helping them enter and succeed in a male-dominated industry is incredible. It's vital. And political engagement, so encouraging and supporting women to join the council, supporting them to become councillors and members of parliament, supporting them to run and participate in politics. It can help increase representation and influence.
So I just want to sort of build on the thing about participation, because, you know, again, we've got these days and they're fantastically well attended, but actually we want to do another version of this next week, and we want to do it and we want to keep the conversation going. And I think to pick up on the point about education is really important. How can we operate as a system to tackle those systemic and structural issues? You know, we need to be doing this together all of the time. It's a great to sort of hear that issue there that was being attended to, Sharon, but that needs to be our sort of way of operating generally as a system, very inclusive. So we can start doing way more of that than we currently do.
Yeah, no, echoing what everyone is saying, and feeling today and have divided between my team. Obviously, in domestic violence, we always say the information is power, and I already described the services we've got. The council is already extending the team, which is great, and securing the funding to make sure we can, which I think is really positive. And that's on the domestic violence, obviously, getting education, getting information, getting support they need, making sure we create safe spaces for people to disclose awareness everywhere with GPs, police, courts. But as Mandy said, then on the Women Equality Network, I'm here today, I think is promoting equity. As you said, is quite essential to break the imbalance, especially coming back from the pandemic and facing the cost of living crisis that is impacting lots of families going to poverty again, and obviously increasing domestic violence. So definitely working on education and opportunities for everyone.
We're down to one mic now. Great. So some of these issues, it feels like we've been talking about them for a long time, and we have been for generations. And it can feel very frustrating that sometimes we make progress as women, then there's a backlash against that progress that we've made, and we can sometimes feel that we're going backwards. There's changes in things around the language that we use, and sometimes we choose to make changes in that language. Sometimes there's challenges in language. There's other challenges and things that are new around respecting individual people's identities, whilst also understanding the need for example, single-sex services, specialist services for women from particular ethnic backgrounds. So there's a whole range of different things that's always shifting. But what do you think are the key issues and challenges for women in our society today, and what can we do to overcome them?
Sort of go around this way, I guess. I guess, again, coming from a South Asian community perspective, I think a lot of our women don't know our rights. And even when they know them, they don't have the confidence to exercise them. So I think, again, it's a lot about what Sharon said, is education. It's not just educating, it's education actually in all different areas, educating the women what their rights are, but then enabling them and facilitating their confidence to be able to exercise those rights. I think it's not that when I grew up that I didn't know my rights. I knew them, but did I have the confidence to exercise them? And that's one of the key things. So I think it's not, I don't think there's one answer for any of this. There's multiple answers and multiple things, multiple activities that needs to be done in different parts, in different arenas. But I definitely think education, getting the women to know their rights and then giving the confidence to exercise their rights is probably what I would suggest is at this stage the most fundamental thing, especially for South Asian women, I would say.
Yeah, I think that obviously I'm confident to generalize that for every woman, not just South Asian, because especially, as I said, Hounslow is very diverse. We've got women from Middle East, South Asia, Europe, and England as well. So I think that is creating the right spaces for get opportunity trainings, information, reaching the schools, promoting education outside the family, because especially when we are talking about domestic violence, maybe the family is not the right place to get those messages. So obviously expanding the services and the right places for people to look for support, training professionals as well as we do in our team to police officers, GPs, and enable everyone to be aware of different indicators, because economical is a huge barrier for people to actually live that relationship if you don't know what you're going to provide to your children. So yeah, working on those different areas that are quite transversal.
I mean, there are a lot of key issues for women in today's society. For example, like gender-based violence and harassment. Women are disproportionately affected by physical, sexual, emotional, psychological abuse, harassment, and violence. Women are often paid less than men in same work and are underrepresented in leadership positions, they often face societal expectations and stereotypes that can limit their opportunities and potential, such as the idea that they should prioritize their family over their career. So again, to effectively address these issues, it would be education, awareness raising, legal reforms, policy reforms, government and organizations coming together to, enact new policies to support women and protect women. Again, economic empowerment, political engagement. But yeah, that's mainly.
And just following on from that, I think really part of our kind of policy work is been trying to create change so that the government are avoiding policies that actually inadvertently facilitate economic abuse, and actually putting in policies that promote those that support women's economic independence. So particular policies in particular those relating to social security, the single payment, universal credit, child maintenance, they should be vetted, through the lens of gender equality and the impact on victims of FOG before being introduced or changed. And then thinking about migrant victims of domestic abuse, we talk about the Domestic Abuse Act and what that's provided, but actually it's not given the same outcomes for all women. So really, again, we need to have equal protection for all survivors. And to achieve this, the no recourse to public funds condition must be removed for all domestic abuse survivors and victims. The destitute domestic violence concession must be extended to all survivors regardless of their immigration status, and the time period of that concession must be extended as well. So there's a lot of things really on a governmental policy level that are actually placing women in more vulnerability and in more economic dependence. And one of the biggest barriers for victims and survivors on leaving, but actually staying away from the perpetrator, is economic independence. Often the things, they may leave, but then actually say, especially in this climate as well, post-pandemic and during a crisis, a cost of living crisis, now more than ever, we really need to be campaigning for economic independence across the board.
I completely agree with that. But the thing that I feel very passionate about is Saida touched upon it, is that this is not a women's issue. This is all of our issues. And I was part of the change in terms of how domestic violence came about, because the commissioner said, this is no longer a women's issue. This is a crime. I want all my officers involved. So to make change happen, it needs to stop being something that women talk about and to include everybody. And in particular, again, when we talk about the education, this is why it will bring about change, because my son, I can assure you, is just as passionate about his sister being treated properly, or his mummy, as she is. And that's how we bring about change, by making it equal for everybody and stopping this, it's only women that talk about this issue.
Thank you. Yes, and I couldn't agree more on that last point. Okay, I'm going to open it up now. I'm sure some of you have questions you would like to ask of our panel, so please, hands in the air. And there's another microphone arriving.
Hello. I have good news and I have bad news. Which one do you want to hear? Which one do you want me to start?
Tell us the good news.
The good news. The good news is I thank everyone here in Hanslow Council. My daughter that I was pregnant with, we had a 10-year war. Then I was pregnant 8 months, and I come here in Britain, and she called me. She said, "Mommy," she said, "Mommy," I said, "I got a job." I said, "What job?" I said, "Clinical psychologist, professional placement." I said, "Yeah, are you telling me the truth?" He said, "Yeah." He said, but the bad news is I'm not coming to London. I want to be near my college, my university. It's only 10 minutes train to go to my job. For 1 year, I go back to college, and my friends who I take the 4-bedroom and put them there, we are 4. So they don't want me to leave. They said, so that's why I get the job there. So that's the bad news. She's not coming home until she finish. And I want her to come home. She say, that's the because she know that I want her to come home and do the professional placement here in London. But because they don't want to miss the friends, they say, oh, don't go. And she's the one who take the 4-bedroom for them, student accommodation. They are together. And he say, let them be together and study. He says, so that's the bad news for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
dear. But-
And the other one, I want to really see you because I'm scared to say it here. And yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank all the panelists. It was an incredible discussion. And Sharon, to you, but also to everybody else in the panel, for somebody who's come from a lived experience and also has young children, I definitely agree with the fact that educating them is very important within the system. But as someone who shares that feeling, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I sometimes tell myself that I'm creating my art not for museums, but I'm creating for her to be able to understand and break that cycle of abuse for her, which I am still a part of. So I do have, and I do feel the importance of having an open channel of communication with my daughter, which I felt was lacking for me when I was growing up. How important do you feel is it for us to protect our children from everything that's going wrong in the world, and in a way also sort of insulate them from these conversations? Or should we be very open with them about our experiences and be able to explain them in their own language what it really means?
Thank you. That's a really, really important question. So the reason I created the program, the .com program, is because I believe communication is a skill, and it's the greatest gift that we can give to our children. We actually have to teach our children how to speak up about things that frighten or worry them. We can lead through our own example of doing that. But so in our program, I teach children to understand that there's nothing so awful or so small that you can't tell someone. So you give them permission to do that. You also give them the emotional vocabulary to be able to do that. And also teaching them that they have a right to feel safe, to be safe, and others have the right to be safe with us. So it's about the language that we use. But I have been very open with my children. I actually don't have my mother in my life anymore because I wasn't safe around her, as well as my father. But when my daughter asked me if my mum was dead, I so wanted to say yes. And I thought, you know what? I cannot start my relationship with my daughter on a lie. So I have to tell her what happened to me. And, I don't go into all of the details. I just said that mummy wasn't safe at home. And that's why it's really important for you to be safe and to be able to tell me anything. And I think that if we can just tell our children that it doesn't matter what's happening, it doesn't matter, even if they feel they've done something wrong, that nothing is their fault. We will work it out together as long as you tell me. So that communication, I believe, is fundamental. And it is something, because there are 1,000 schools across the country that use this program. So it is something that can be taught in school.
Okay, so I think there was a lady over there.
Hi, thank you to the panel. I've got a question for Naomi. We're specialist home engagement leads for the Feltham area, and I know you work with organisations. I was just wondering how we access your services, please.
Okay. Yes, so C is a second tier service. So we don't provide direct frontline services to victim survivors. but we do provide training and resources for frontline professionals who work with victim survivors. So you can contact us via info@survivingeconomicabuse.org. But if you type into Google surviving economic abuse, it's one of the first ones that pops up. But also in terms of the partnership that we are in with Money Advice Plus, they deliver the frontline service, which is the financial support line for victims and survivors of domestic abuse. So a professional could, for example, you could refer a victim, a service user into this financial support line casework service if they're, for example, in debt as a result of coercive control and economic abuse. But talk to me afterwards and I'll give you more details.
Thanks. At the front, Denise.
Yes, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Denise Smith, and I have the privilege of working for a majority group here in Hounslow. And I've worked in politics for about 40 years, and I've worked for a number of MPs, mainly women, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm also proud of the work that all the major political parties are now doing to encourage women. And I heard from the Secretary on the radio this morning talking about the work that he was doing as a feminist. And I just thought we really have come a long way, because even 10 years ago, that probably wouldn't have happened. Anyway, my question, what I'd like to ask the panel is, if you could give today's teenagers, as they're going into adulthood, one piece of advice, what would it be?
So I think it's really important to set boundaries. I think from a very young age, women, just people generally, but women especially, really need to understand what the boundaries are. And I think if the family, again, to me, the heart of a child or of us humans is the family, it's our environment at home. And I think if we start off there teaching our children the boundaries and giving them respect when we speak to them, and it's like what Sharon had said, it's communication, the vocabulary we use with our children, the words, the terminology, I think is absolutely key in helping them to be able to express themselves correctly. I think that is one advice, and helping them to set boundaries where they know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I think a lot of things in our culture in today's world that we're living in, especially for women, it's a very gray area. And I think a lot of it gets confused with how are we showing up in relationships? How do men and women actually show up in our relationships? And I think putting that expectation in from a young age is probably gonna set a pathway for what their life will look like in the future, and how successful they're probably or likely to be in life in terms of the different experiences they encounter through their journey. So that would be my take on this.
So I would say what I do say to my own daughter is believe in yourself. You can be anything that you choose to be, but you have to choose it. So if somebody treats you in a way that isn't, that as if you're not good enough, then make the choice to believe in yourself. And it's okay to say no to that situation, because you will create for yourself what you want in your life. But sometimes it's quite difficult because you do have to say no. Yeah, you do have to make a choice. So there's a
I'll just say, so I have got a teenage daughter, as you know, Denise, and a teenage son, and exactly that. I think that particularly through COVID and other stresses and strains, I think for some teenagers, their world have become quite narrow. And I do totally encourage, I give them lots of other advice as well, but that's not for sharing here today. But I do totally encourage that they have to look out, that they have to explore. And they do, I know it's a bit of a cliche, and they have to be kind, ideally to each other. But it really is about that opportunity. And I think a lot of it, they feel very sort of constricted with what they can achieve. And yeah, for me, it's be an explorer and it will be all right, mostly.
Yeah, it took me a while to think about the answer because it's not easy. I'm having 3 teenagers, actually, girls, twins. So equity is very important with twins. So they are very different, black and white. So I always, as Mandy said, I always try to encourage them not to be scared because I think, especially for girls, it's always about fear. And I always said, don't be scared, be careful, work hard and embrace the opportunities, especially in women. I think the imposter syndrome is again in the workplace. And I love to give as much as opportunities I can to them. And yeah, to encourage them to fly, to go for it, to embrace opportunities, to have fun, and yes, to the language and the empowerment is very important for me. That's my message for them to become independent and financially independent in future as well.
Thank you very much. So I think, okay, I've got Gabriella and Shantanu. And, oh, she said one.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate what everybody's saying. Sorry, my name is Gabriella Giles. I'm a councillor for Chiswick Riverside. I really appreciate what everybody's saying about women's education. The one thing that I struggle that we haven't really touched on today is the education of our young boys and men. Because when we look at it, they are the perpetrators of violence. We have seen a rise of toxic masculinity and people like Andrew Tate kind of infiltrating mentalities within our schools. Supporting kind of mentalities around boys will be boys, and you know, if a boy hits you, it's fine because it shows that he's into you, and allowing that. So and kind of as a society acknowledging that this is actually part of what we are. So what is it that we can do to educate our young men that that behavior is not acceptable, that women do have boundaries, young girls have boundaries over their own autonomy, because I really appreciate the ethic that women can do anything, because we can do anything. And ultimately, when I look at it, in whether it be the boardroom or otherwise, women kick ass 100% of the time when it comes to them doing their jobs. That's never, I don't think that's ever been the problem. It's getting recognition for that. But part of that is also, what do we do to educate boys and men that their role is as equal in eliminating domestic violence, supporting women, creating equity, whether that be in the workplace or in the home. And I feel like if we could do more on that, where can we start, I suppose, is my question.
I just wanted to add quickly, as I said, or representing the Women Equality Network, back to that, is as completely agree with you, it's not changing the mindset of girls, it's changing the mechanics. And obviously doing it right, because it's obviously about education, but also opportunities outside the classroom. Sometimes we have workshops for girls about confidence, and then for boys it's about sports. So that's not equity, because they have to have all that kind of training as well on emotional psychology, on equality, on being respectful, on domestic violence. So again, coming back to my role as an ITBA, is quite common to put on the light in the woman to go through freedom program, apply to court. You have to do this, you have to do that. And what about the men? So definitely, I agree with you. It's about changing the mechanics, not the mindset. So we have to look at what we do since primary school to. Sorry, I know that you want. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. So I work as an advisor, safeguarding advisor to the police, and they said, well, we have to deal with violence against women and girls. Their idea of early intervention is a 13-year-old. So we have just created in the .com program a year 2 lesson for 5-6-year-olds. And that is how we change the mindset of young boys and men, because it's teaching them about consent, about being safe, that we all have the right to feel safe, all of those things. But it starts really, really early. And it's also about changing the mindset of schools, really, because it's some of the schools are very forward thinking and they want to have this kind of education. And some of them are, it's English, maths and science, and we'll squeeze it in if we've got time. That's the mindset I think that needs to change.
And I think just looking around the room, I would say probably 95% of us grew up in a world where we had no influence of social media. Yeah, pretty much. Not to offend anybody, but I think we didn't have the influence and the pressure and just all consuming power and control that is social media. So whilst we can in education and in the family sphere and in different sectors start the conversation, we also have to think about, well, is that going to all be undone by then what they're being exposed to via social media platforms? And I know the online safety bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment, has been looking at and recognizing the impact of really kind of harmful, sexualized, misogynistic behaviors that really young children are being exposed to from a very early age. So hopefully, if there's more protection around that and also more conversation around social media, and that we are able to have those discussions as well.
I just wanted to say that in regards to that, the question you asked was, where do you start? And again, I think culture plays a huge part in that. And the first few early years of a child are probably the most key important years. And again, I'd go back, it's at the heart of family values. I was pulled up by my daughter a few years back when I was on my journey of feminism and exploring women empowerment. And it just goes to show how embedded it is in our psychic. So every time when I finish cooking the food or at home at night, serving the night dinner, so I'd finish cooking up and I'll shout out to my daughter and I'll say, Sophie, put the plates on the table. And she'd do that often. And then one day she just sort of turned around and she said, do you know what? It really surprises me that you're a woman who talks about feminism and women empowerment, and you always say my name when it comes to laying the table, but you never call out Amar. And she said, why don't you ever call your son? Why are you always calling me? And it really threw me back because I didn't see that coming. And I really questioned myself and I said, yes, why don't I? Why don't I ever ask Samar to lay the table? And it's these tiny little things that are embedded in our culture and in our society. And most of women from my generation that we still hold on to even today, that discrimination in these little nuances which play a part in our psychic and in our everyday life. So I would definitely say it's all about at home. It's about us, we as women. What are the conversations? What is the terminology? What are our daily activities where we're teaching these values to our boys? So I would definitely say that would be my answer to this.
Thank you very much. Shantanu Rajwa, I'm the leader of the council. Thank you to the panel, firstly. As a male, actually, you've got me thinking as well, which is great. I'm going to ask you the question that people often ask me that makes me stop and think about it. A lot of our discussion has been around what we need to do over the longer term. And the thing that gets me thinking is actually between now and when we meet again next year, what would progress look like?
I just wanted to just quickly say that we don't need to wait till next year to meet. As Mandy said, we can meet weekly.
That was a very good answer. That was a very good answer. But I think for me, one of the things that I'm really passionate about creating more awareness is around religious institutions. I think religious institutions like the mosque, the synagogue, the churches, and temples, I think these conversations need to start taking place in those areas. And I think we need more men ambassadors to have these conversations in those areas. And for me, I would really want to see more of that happening and more men coming forward and starting those conversations in those institutions. And if we could do that for a year, my God, would we see a change?
For me, because we've talked so much about education and it's obviously important to everybody, there is a free version of the .com program. So I'm not even using the F word. I'm not even asking for funding. We could actually bring that into our schools for free. Obviously, it would be wonderful if it could be a bigger thing, but actually making that start and maybe coming to some of the training. Thank you.
And then I guess just in terms of the responses as a borough in relation to tackling gender-based violence and domestic abuse, I think within the local commissioning that we need to ensure that services are equipped to provide economic advocacy so that we're supporting those who are directly working with survivors and victims to kind of build their capacity and understanding about economic independence and economic safety, which ultimately really underpins safety for women and girls.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all very much. We're out of time now, so a big round of applause, please, for our panel. And I will hand back over to Councillor Gerrell to provide some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Catherine. And once again, I would like to thank everyone for attending this afternoon. And this is my first time I have attended this, and I have been very honest. I have gathered a lot of information. And I think it's time for men to change their attitude. And we've been discussing where do we start? Where do we touch? I believe very strongly that charity begins at home. And whichever culture it is, whether it's Hindu, English, Muslim, Asian, you can Spanish, whatever it is. In our houses, what we do wrong is, where we go wrong is, a boy can do whatever he wants and the girl cannot. We got to stop that. So we start from there. And children spend more time in the house than in schools. So I would finish with that. Refreshments are ready. Please have them.